morning, sunshine. If you're new to me, hi, my name is Karen, and my daughters and I have been traveling for the past 5 years. We started out traveling throughout the United States. We did a lot of road tripping, and we went to a lot of like national parks and house sat for like a long time, and the kids were kind of little. They were 10 and 12 back then, so we try to do a lot of like really educational things. Now, if you're new to me, please say hello so I can meet you for the first time. And if you've seen me before, please say hi, because we're friends and stuff, right? So you should be able to say hi. Yeah, so we started traveling throughout the United States, and the main focus was the educational aspect of travel. But very quickly, as they grew, the depth of the education kind of grew with them. So that's how we ended up in Mexico. We needed something a little bit different. Like, one of the reasons I started traveling for educational purposes was so they could expand their minds. I feel like living in one place kind of pigeonholes you a little bit. You only get one perspective, you get used to the culture around you, and you kind of start thinking that that's all there is. So part of the reason we started traveling was to get a new perspective on life in general. Good morning. Oh my God, the comments are staying on the phone. Sorry, if you've never done a live before, the comments pop up and then usually disappear, and I am so happy. So, good morning, JB, and good morning. Okay, there has to be something more. Could you please tell me? I know that you guys are a couple, right? So who's watching me this morning so I can say good morning? And JB, it says, I feel so inspired to head to Mexico and Guatemala with my son. How old is your son? And when are you starting your travels? Very curious on that. So, oh, and good morning, Danny. I have seen you in the comments. How are you? Oh, Washington State. I love Washington State. That is one of the states we actually visited. So we ended up going to 42 states when we were road tripping. And I have to say, I loved 99% of them. They were all so beautiful. And Washington State has so much beautiful nature. Anyhow, so when we decided to come to Mexico, it was kind of to expand our mind culturally. So a lot of people, good morning, Franco. A lot of people ask me why we come to Mexico. And I think a lot of people assume that it's because it's cheap. But to be honest, I feel like it's the quality of life. So we came just to explore, to see what there was, and to learn about Mexican culture. But once we knew about Mexican culture, we realized that you can achieve such peace here. Like, the hustle, even though there's big cities that do have hustle, the hustle is just not the same as the hustle in the United States. And having an autoimmune disease, the hustle in the United States was killing me slowly. So it was so nice to have a different perspective on what life could be, like daily life, like just like taking care of a home, taking care of children, taking care, going grocery shopping and running daily errands and things like that. So JB says he's almost 3 and I want to start early. Oh, 3 is perfect. I kind of wish I would have started with my kids earlier. When my kids were little, I did have, I'm an entrepreneur, so I had a business. And I was so consumed by that business that I think that's what catapulted me to this life, because I worked way too hard and I really didn't get to give them the kind of attention that I feel like they deserved at 3 years old. So regrets, but I made up for it, hopefully. We'll see when they go to the therapies as an adult. All right, so there has to be something more said. We'll be in Matagalpa until February. That's Honduras, right? And then 6 months in Guatemala and 6 months in St. Chris, then probably South America. Yep, we're a couple, Scott and Lydia. Well, good morning, Scott and Lydia. We feel like we know you. I kind of feel like I know you too, because I remember when you were in the United States planning, you were coming here first, weren't you? So I'm in San Cristobal, if anybody is watching, San Cristobal de las Casas in Mexico, in the state of Chiapas. And I'm pretty sure Scott and Lydia were planning on coming here first and then didn't. So, but we will meet one day. We will meet one day. Oh, so they're in Nicaragua. So Matagalpa is in Nicaragua. I love Nicaraguan food. One of my best friends growing up was from Nicaragua. And she would feed me the most delicious things. Like they would make these things in giant pots and then put salad on top. That always intrigued me because I'm not a salad person. But oh my God, it was so delicious. Good morning, Francie. Oh, I'm so happy to see you guys. It's so crazy, like when you see the comments and you respond to the comments, I feel like you start getting to know people. And even though like I only know like little snippets of what you guys comment, it's really cool to connect like through the internet, you know. I'm just starting my plans to get down there. Once again, planning. I'm looking at Puebla State. I've never been to Puebla. I hear wonderful things about it, but I've never been. I actually, this month, actually in a couple, today's the 6th, so on the 14th, there's a huge festival that starts in Oaxaca. And my game plan was to fly to Mexico City because the flights are like super cheap from here. I think they're like between $25 and $50 round trip. So my plan was to fly to Mexico City, then take a bus through Puebla and down to Oaxaca. So I don't know if that's gonna happen because it's like a week away. But I really wanted to go to the festival. The festival lasts 7 days and it's supposed to be like a bunch of different cultures coming together to create this gigantic festival. So it sounds incredible. So if you live in Oaxaca, please let me know how it is if I don't get to make it. So, let's see. Oh, Lydia and Scott said, yes, we were headed to St. Chris. At the last minute, Lydia decided her home country should be first, and her mom's 90th birthday is in November, but we will get to St. Chris. I totally understand that. I have to be, so my home country is Venezuela. My mom is Argentinian and my dad was Cuban. So to me, like going to Venezuela would have been optimal. And you know, Venezuela is going through a lot of hardship, but it's such a gorgeous country and it's my culture. So there's always that pull. So I can completely understand why Lydia would want to go back to Nicaragua. Like I can completely understand, even more if she has family there. My family is dwindling. A lot of them have flown out and moved to all different countries like Canada, Chile, Europe. So I don't have that much family left in Venezuela. And of course, my grandparents have passed away. So Danny said, well, I'll be waiting to see if you go on the adventure. I hope I can go on that adventure. I hope I can go on the adventure. Part of me kind of like, so when I went to Guatemala, I was like, I think a week shy of Semana Santa. And after seeing, I don't know if you guys have seen that video of the festival that they had on the streets, like part of me was like, man, I wish I would have extended my trip just a week longer to see what Semana Santa was like there, because that festival was so different than what they do here in Mexico. And I think part of me, because, you know, Chiapas and Guatemala is so close to each other, I really did think that a lot of the culture would just assimilate each other, right? But I realized that some of it did, like a lot of the outfits, a lot of the foods and things like that were similar, but that festival was nothing like I have ever seen here. I feel like one of the most special things in my perspective that Mexico does is that they tend to celebrate everything. And starting with Dia de los Muertos, right? Like they're celebrating death, they're welcoming the loved ones back, and you know, it's always a party. So every street festival that I have seen here is colorful and there's dancing and there's costumes, like people dress up. So it's sort of like a carnaval, but adapted to the significance of each holiday. And over there, it was so somber. It was so somber. And I know that there's also like the religious aspect of that, but it was incredible. Like, I got teary-eyed listening to the band play, because like you could feel the depth of the situation for them. And I don't know if you saw the video, but they carry these gigantic, I don't even know what to call it. It's like a giant piece of wood with the saints, or in this case it was Jesus and Mary, on top, and a bunch of decorations, flowers, etc., etc. But the piece of wood looked so incredibly heavy and so incredibly huge, and these men and women were carrying it and like balancing it, because they had to do like a sway to keep it balanced. Oof. It was intense. It was intense. Danny says, my family was from Puebla in the 1800s and sort of migrated up Mexico and ended up in Los Angeles. I'm trying out of Washington and it's not for me. Oh, no, you don't like Washington? That is so curious. So I've heard that living there is nothing like visiting. So I only visited, but I would love to know, why don't you like Washington? And I mean, I can imagine there's a huge difference between LA and Washington. Like, we've been to LA, but LA scared us. Like, it was too much. My daughter, there was one place in the United States my daughter wanted to visit, and that was LA. And as soon as we got there, we started driving around. Okay, so full story. We were house sitting, and let's see if I remember the name. No, probably not. It was a Latino name. It was a Spanish name. Well, anyways, it was not in LA. It was off in the country, and we were taking care of horses. It was like a ranch house, taking care of horses, 4 beautiful dogs that used to swim in the pool with us. Beautiful experience, right? But to go from that, and then we drove to LA, we got stuck in traffic for like 2 hours. It felt like forever. And then when we get to LA, my daughter's face, I think she was, I don't know, maybe 9 years old. This had been her dream forever. And we were driving through LA. She looked so disappointed. Poor thing. I don't know what she imagined from TV. The way that is depicted in television is usually so different than reality. So I don't know if she was expecting to like see stars walking in the streets and things like that. We went to Hollywood Boulevard and the Chinese Theater and things like that. And she didn't even want to get off the car. She was going through an internal struggle there. So yeah, we didn't do that much in LA. So we ended up going to San Diego from then on. All right, so she says, it's too cloudy. Oh, too much of the time for me. LA is okay, but I wouldn't go back now. Why wouldn't you go back? Is it because of the craziness and, like there's too many people and things like that? I didn't know Washington was too cloudy, but I did hear that like there's only like a few months that is like the perfect time to be in Washington. Danny says, oh, poor thing. There are some cool things to see there, but it's not nearly as glamorous as depicted on TV. I agree, from the little bit that we saw. One thing that I did love was their food. Oh my God, it was so delicious. So, too many people, too expensive. Yeah, so the place, well, one of the reasons that I say that we live in Mexico for like the actual style of living is because our home, I guess technically, is Miami, because that's where the kids were born and that's where they grew up and that's where my family is. And as far as money, totally agree. Right here in San Cristobal, I have a 3-bedroom home. It's kind of like a townhouse, kind of. It's set up like a townhouse. We live in a privada and there's 6 homes that are exactly the same. They don't call them townhouses here for some reason, and they're not attached to each other. So it is like a freestanding home. But it's 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and I have my own cisterna in tinaco. Cisterna is where you keep the water, so water well. And I pay right now, with the peso being at 17 to the dollar, I pay $530 US dollars. And if I were to have a home similar to this one in the United States, I'd probably be paying like $5,000. So there's just like no comparison, as far as the money goes. But like I said, for me, it's not only like what I can afford here versus what I can afford in the United States. It's also the fact that I think there's more respect to human life here. In Miami, like, everything revolves around making sure people are comfortable. So if you have a business, you work extra hours, 9 to 10 at night, 9 in the morning to 10 at night. Like, as a consumer, there's always something available. As a worker, you're one of those people that are working at those crazy times or crazy hours. And it doesn't stop. You do like 14-hour shifts. Here, that's not really a thing that they do. And I help out in an English class. I help them practice. And, one of the things that I said was like, people work too much in the United States. And they're like, oh, but people work too much here. And I'm like, yes, it's true. Mexicans are so hard workers, we all know this. But I'm like, but at what time do you have lunch? And everybody, they call it comida here, right? So what time is your comida? And everybody said 3 o'clock. And I'm like, when you have your lunch, do you sit down to have your lunch? They're like, yeah, of course, we go home and we have lunch with the family. It's a thing. They make it, and it's okay. It's allowed. I'm like, yeah, in the United States, you don't do that. Like, I can't remember having lunch while living in the United States. And I don't know what you guys' experience are. If you disagree with this, please do share, because I'm always curious. I do feel like, even though I think I'm technically an expat because I do have an American passport, I do feel like my experience is a little bit mixed with that of an immigrant. So my work experience, like, I started working at 10 years old with my parents in the middle of the night in a newspaper thing. Like, we would stuff newspapers, but we would go to a warehouse. My little sister would fall asleep on top of the newspapers. Like, typical immigration story that you hear on TV. So I feel like my experience is a little bit mixed with the experience of an immigrant. So here, even though I do feel like an expat because I have a lot of the privileges of making dollars and being able to afford a lot of things that people here don't, I also feel like a little bit like an immigrant, because I feel like even though I speak Spanish, I speak Caribbean, let's call it, Spanish. So there's a little bit of a mix. Danny says, I'm definitely used to eating lunch at my desk while I work. Maybe more so now that I work from home. That's a good point. That's another thing. I didn't really think of the working from home. I did not get to work in the US after 2020, so I'm sure a lot has changed. I sold my last business, so I'm kind of like a serial entrepreneur. And I've had 3 major businesses as an adult. I sold my last business, which was a bakery that I had for 10 years, in 2017. And in February of 2018 is when we started traveling. So ever since then, I've been a sort of digital nomad and creating YouTube videos as my side fun thing. And yeah, so that's been my experience. So after 2020, I didn't really get that. So going back to the Guatemala versus Mexico thing, because it's what I promised in the thumbnail. One of the things I've noticed, and of course, I did not spend as much time in Guatemala as I have spent in Mexico, was that there was a very drastic difference between the haves and have-not. And as a traveler that travels for culture and not for tourism, I found it hard to assimilate. So when I went to like Atitlan, for example, I booked my hotel through WhatsApp. I don't know who gave me this idea to do this, but I was having a really hard time finding a hotel in a reasonable price through, booking.com and things like that. And I'm like, maybe I'm just not doing it like the locals do. And in Mexico, everybody does everything through WhatsApp. So it occurred to me, why not just do it through WhatsApp? So I went on Facebook and found a few places that I thought were amazing, and I sent them a message, and that's how I ended up booking my hotel. So if you saw that video of me arriving there in fear, I was nervous. I do a lot of things that feel fun and edgy when I first do them. And then when I realize I'm traveling with children, because my kids sometimes, they're teenagers. They seem like adults. But when I get to the place, I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? It was definitely one of those moments that I regretted when I did. But it turned out to be good, don't get me wrong. The place was adorable, and the lady that took care of the place was so nice and helpful and very accommodating. So I loved it. Totally recommend that place. Having said that, the hotel was surrounded by a giant wall with barbed wire on the top, and around it, like I said, so the class structure was night and day. So part of me feels that these people that are making money in this hotel are not contributing to the society around them. And therefore, me renting that place was contributing to that. That did not feel very comfortable to me. I always try to find a way to get back to the place that I'm staying at. So my solution to this, was to shop in the areas around the hotel. Unfortunately, there wasn't that much that I could find. So we did end up eating inside the hotel a lot. I feel like if I personally was looking for an apartment there to live, I wouldn't even know where to start as far as that structure went, because where the hotel was around it, there was nothing. There was nothing that I could rent. There weren't apartments. And you can watch the video if, I'm not explaining myself right to see what I mean. But if I were to live there, I wouldn't even know where to start looking for places. So I think this created a situation in which all the Americans or Canadians or expats in general are all bundled into one section, which I would say is San Marco. San Marco has a really heavy spiritual tourism community. So a lot of it didn't even really feel local. It felt from all kinds of places. It was kind of like a melting pot of spirituality, or almost new agey spirituality. And a lot of the Americans were there. It was also twice the price as everywhere else. It was so expensive. Buying a coffee or a drink was so expensive. A lot of the restaurants and stores in general were owned by extranjeros, which just means like a foreigner, not necessarily an expat. So not what I'm looking for, right? What I look for when I go to a new country is to really go into the culture and meet the people from there, to understand their perspective, to open our minds to something new. And if something caters to tourism, then they're catering to who you already are and not really giving you a chance to be somebody new. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does. So having said that, I think for me to even consider going back and living in Guatemala, I would really have to travel to more areas that are not as touristy as Antigua and Lake Atitlan, and to really have an idea of what it would be like to live there. And for Lydia and Scott, you guys are gonna be there a lot longer than I was. So I would love to hear your experience once you go, to see if you do experience the tourism as high as I did, or if you do find that you can blend in with the locals and really get the local experience. We'd love to know that. So please do share when you get there. I know you have a while to go since you have to be in Nicaragua until November, but I'm very curious to see what that would be like. So now, Danny, are you planning on coming to Mexico? I don't know if you already mentioned that. All right, okay, you said that your family is from Puebla. Are you planning on, are you thinking of moving to Mexico with your 3-year-old? Or you're just planning to travel? Wait, I could be wrong. That might not be the 3-year-old. No, JB's the one with the 3-year-old. Sorry. So, yeah, very curious of that. So, I'm doing another live in Spanish in a little bit. So, I wanted to keep this one short. But I'm very grateful for you guys joining me. And I did want to give you my opinion, unfiltered. Okay, Danny's son is 13. I confused you with JB. My apologies. Danny, are you planning on traveling to Mexico though? I'll give you a moment. Yeah, so I wanted to keep this short, but I did want to give you an unfiltered opinion on Guatemala versus Mexico. I feel like Mexico is just such a huge country. And every place that I have visited so far, and I haven't visited that much in northern Mexico. The farthest north I've been to would be Mexico City and Guadalajara. I did go to Querétaro too, and Guanajuato. Those are the places that I visited in northern Mexico. But I do feel like there's more to choose from in Mexico than there was in Guatemala. Because when I was doing my planning, even the flying from here to there were very specific places, and I feel like the places that they offer you to fly to are focused on the tourism, right? And I totally understand the tourism business is huge, and I know where I live right now, Chiapas, that is one of the main ways that they make their money, or how the economy runs in general, because we don't have factories, well, except for Coca-Cola. We do have Coca-Cola and Pepsi that uses our water. But aside from that, there aren't that many factories and things like that. So that's why, in theory, Chiapas is one of the poorest states in Mexico. All right, so Danny said, I'm hoping to visit in the fall and move by the spring or so. Oh, wonderful. I love the fact that you're planning to visit before moving. I think that is the best way to do it. And that's kind of what I did. I actually never really thought that I would end up living in Mexico. We came to visit because in Merida they have a huge worldschooling community. So that was my goal, to meet Anne from Priority Focus Life and meet this community of world schoolers, because, you know, my kids world school. And I just fell in love with it. I really, really did. Like, I started feeling better health-wise, and then it was just like no turning back. So because my kids really like having a home base, like having a room to call their own while we travel, I thought that this was like the perfect trade-off to Miami, because Miami is a lot. I don't do well like health-wise in Miami. So this was perfect. So I'm glad that you're visiting before moving, because a lot of people just move and they don't really know what to expect. So that's wonderful. And JB says, is it easy to spend a few months there and then back in the US? I share custody. Yes, I share custody as well. Now my kids are not 3. So the dad is totally okay with, you know, me going back and forth. I actually plan the amount of time I'm going to spend in Mexico based on the kids and not the dad. But like I said, they're big enough to like voice their opinion. But yes, so I'm not a Mexican resident because I don't spend enough time here because we do travel. So I find it quite easy. It actually helps me keep my word. The fact that our visas are gonna expire, so you know, this 6 months is the max that the dad knows that he'll be away from his kids, kind of concept, right? So yeah, I fly back and forth. It's been 2.5 years and I've never not gotten 180 days. I've never been questioned. They will ask, like when you get to the visa counter, what it is that you're doing in Mexico. I say world schooling because it's my truth. And that's it. They always give me 100 days. I've never been given a hard time. I've never been questioned. So I would say it's easy. But everybody's experience might not be the same. I also speak Spanish, so I always speak to them in Spanish. I don't know if that helps or not, but okay, Danny says I could just go. That's how, and I ended up in Washington. Yeah, you know okay, I totally understand that because you know what? You can always go back. Like you didn't like Washington and you're thinking of moving somewhere else. You know what? Yeah, why not? I totally get that. Like I always tell my kids, so we do this check-in every once in a while to make sure that we're all happy with what's happening, like our lifestyle. And I always question them. I'm like, do you want to go live somewhere else? Because we could go anywhere. It doesn't really matter where we go. I personally love Mexico, and they happen to love Mexico. But if that ever changed, we would just go somewhere else. Like, that's kind of what we're thinking. Yeah. So do as you wish, and then if you don't like it, just move on. Just be ready for the flexibility. I would definitely not buy a house. Don't buy a house without knowing if you're gonna like it or not. So, oh, Anne is here. So if anybody ever hears me talking about Anne, there's Anne, priority focused life. Yeah, her and so I came to Mexico in part because of her, and we became great friends, and we traveled through Mexico together, and she is the best travel person. Like we just clicked because we do it chill, we do it slow, and we allow each other to change our minds. So we have also canceled plans and been totally okay with it. Okay, Danny says, not buying a house yet. And she said, hey, Anne. I don't know if you saw. Yeah. So, all right, guys, I'm going to leave you because in 30 minutes, I'm going to do this all over again in Spanish. But it was so nice chatting with you. And if you ever have questions, please let me know. I can do these whenever. I try not to schedule them because I never know how I'm going to feel in the morning. But I feel pretty good today, so I'm glad I scheduled it. And thank you guys for joining me. Back at ya. You're the perfect travel buddy. All right, love you guys. Bye. All right, let's see if I know how to turn this off.